Disruptor detected.
Hi, it's Tom with a look at Nex Machina on PC. So the aim here is really to see how Housemarque's latest twin-stick shooter holds up on several GPUs at high resolutions like 1440p and 4K. After all, Nex Machina is an unusual game by design. With a blend of voxels and traditional geometry, it's a different ballgame for most PC setups. Nothing stays still, environments shift and change shape, objects procedurally chip away to gunfire, and enemies turn up in droves, with heavy bursts of particles and alpha once the action really kicks off. Just like Resogun before it, it's incredible to watch, but for any GPU, it's surprising how easy it is to still hit 60 FPS. Okay, so what you've been watching so far is Nex Machina at 4K maxed out. This is running on a GTX 1080 Ti paired with a more down-to-earth CPU, the i5-6500 at a default 3.2 GHz clock. You'd expect this card to nail it, and you'd be right. Basically, the settings menu has three main graphics options right at the bottom, for screen space reflection, shadows, and voxels. Maxing that out, our 1080 Ti basically hits between 85 and 100 FPS, as you can see from the ReviewTuner stats at top right. Now interestingly, this proves using a middle ground i5 CPU isn't an issue. Often we see voxel based games leaning heavily on CPUs or GPU compute to handle the physics and huge rendering distances, but here it's kept in check at 50% usage per core at peak, crucially spread across all threads. That's a big step up from the beta actually, where the game was seemingly locked to only one core. Now the loads spread evenly. That's the 1080 Ti in action, clearly no problem hitting 60 FPS at 4K maxed out, and trying a step down with the GTX 1080, that's still a really easy target to hit. Even with a lesser 2560 CUDA cores, around 1000 cut from the Ti model, there's still lots of headroom for hitting 60 FPS locked. Now obviously I've kept VSync off to show it, which is why we have screen tear here, and at 65 to 75 FPS the card is in the clear. Again, no compromise to the settings and the game runs beautifully here. Meanwhile, I'll be looking at the console settings in more detail soon, but I can say a true 4K is only possible on PC, though it demands GPU brute force to get there. What that means is sadly, 4K at max settings is too much of a stretch for a mid-range card like Nvidia's GTX 1060, which we have here. That said, it can just about do it, and tinkering with the settings reveals how much of an impact each one has. So for example, start the game at max settings and 4K on this 1060 and you get 35 to 40 FPS. It's no good at all for a fast-paced shooter, but if we go back into the settings and switch off screen space reflections first, right away you get a gain of about 6 or 7 FPS in the Forest Hunter level. That pulls us to the mid-40s, not bad, and the difference can be tricky to pick out with it on this level, though later stages do show reflections being stripped out entirely. That's still not quite where we want to be though. Dropping shadows all the way to low doesn't actually change as much as you'd expect. It's margin of error stuff between gameplay runs, though arguably there's a 1 to 2 FPS gain here by shifting from high to low. Bearing in mind shadow quality is usually one of the more taxing settings in PC games, it's strange to see there's not much range here, and the GTX 1060 is still in the mid-40s. The biggest and best way to bridge the gap to 4K 60 FPS is, yep, you guessed it, dropping that voxel quality setting down to low. Yes, it is harsh to put everything on low to hit 4K, but again, it's surprising how difficult it is to spot the difference at times. Voxel detail is dialed back, but the action moves so fast it's a tough one to catch. More importantly though, you're getting a plus 18 FPS boost from that downgrade, easily bringing you up to the 60 FPS line. It's not 100% solid, and moving between areas can drop to 58 FPS for example, but generally this works really well on the GTX 1060. The main takeaway is that voxel quality is the biggest deciding factor in Nex Machina's performance, and looking at this footage, it's still a beautiful looking game even on the lowest settings it has. But let's say you want to run everything at maximum. In that case, the only option is to run the game at a lower resolution, of course, a popular next best pick being 1440p. And for comparison with the GTX 1060, let's bring in AMD's equivalent RX 580. Using the latest drivers as of editing this video, which I'll add to the screen right now, it's surprising just how close it is between the two. The 1060 and 580 fit in the mid-range price bracket, and 1440p at max settings turns out to be a feasible goal. Using the intro attract sequences to get similar gameplay, actually it turns out the RX 580 has a slight frame rate advantage in the end. Talking on the stats, the GTX 1060 nets you 81.3 FPS on average across these tests, compared to the 84.4 FPS on the RX 580. Neither card drops below 60 FPS, which is crucial, and clearly there's still untapped performance if you say want to downsample from high resolutions. But at 1440p, Nex Machina plays with no issues whatsoever on either card. Bearing in mind the standard PS4 version runs at a native 900p, we'd put this down as a win, and actually you can hit 1440p with GPUs lower down the ladder, like the RX 570. So here's the 570 in action, and again you're looking at a lowest point of 60 FPS or so, and supposing it does veer too close to 60 FPS for comfort, just dropping voxel quality by a notch to medium keeps it in check. For playback at high resolutions, Nex Machina has plenty of options. The good news is an i5-6500 CPU gets the job done, and even older graphics cards like the popular GTX 970 has a decent turnout with the game at 1440p. Check this out, max settings, and again there's a similar return to the GTX 1060, a region of about 65 to 75 FPS with no drawbacks elsewhere. Anyway, I'll be back to see how the console versions, PS4 and PS4 Pro, hold up with a separate video very soon. There's obviously a strong lineup of Housemarque titles on PS3 and PS4 already, but right now it's just great to see the finished studio's work making the jump to PC. Nex Machina's well worth checking out, I had plenty of fun with it. And it's fair to say, with the right GPU in hand, the PC version's real main advantage is pushing image quality to much greater heights than console. But that's all from me for now. If you found this quick primer on Nex Machina's PC performance useful, feel free to like and subscribe. And since this video is in 4K with lots of busy action on screen, it's well worth checking out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net to see the original source file before uploading to YouTube. But until next time, thanks for watching.
Complete.